Dimension table details. So we know exactly what our dimensions are in our business. How do we go about actually building the column structure and the design of our dimension tables? It's broken down into three categories. They are this. First are going to be your keys. Second are going to be your attributes. And lastly is going to be metadata. Now, what are each of these three things? Let's talk about them. First of all, are the keys. Well, since we're talking about a data warehouse, this data is going to be coming from a source. It's going to be coming from a transactional database, and those transactional databases have keys of their own. Those keys that are coming in from the transactional database, those are not going to be our primary key typically. Those are going to be what's sometimes referred to as a business key. Sometimes it's also called an alternative key. So I'm just going to write alt here and candidate here as well. Now, if those aren't going to be our primary key, but we are storing them, then what is going to be our primary key? We're going to create a field with the identity property, and this is going to be called the surrogate key. This is going to be the primary key of our data warehouse. So there's two keys, but only one of them is actually enforced as a key on the database. That's the surrogate key. And we're going to be bringing in the primary key from the transactional database that we're just going to be calling the business key. The attribute is the dimension itself. This is the product name. This is the customer name. This is the geography, the date. These are the things that give our data depth. So I'm going to put this here. This is really what we're after when we're talking about designing a dimension. And the metadata itself, this is going to be something that's more for slowly changing dimensions, something we're going to talk about, or tracking successfulness of batch loads like batch ID. So I'm just going to go ahead and put in here SCD for slowly changing dimensions, something we're going to cover. Something like create dates or update dates, those are all going to be stored here. And as well as lineage keys. Those are all things that we're going to be talking about throughout this CBT Nuggets module here. And guess what? The virtual lab is where we can go to see this already in action. I've got it fired up here. We're going to hop on to Client Nug. I'm going to paste my password in, click go, and we're going to launch SSMS. And we'll get connected to SQL Nug 2. Let's go ahead and expand our databases, and then of course into the data warehouse. Let's expand tables. And instead of actually looking at the data just yet, let's expand customer and then columns. Check it out. You can see right here we have this customer key. This is going to be our surrogate key, the one that we created for this data warehouse. And right below it, the Wide World Importers customer ID. Yeah, that's going to be our business key or alternate key. We then have our attributes like the customer name, the bill to name, the category. You get those items. And then lastly, we have our metadata, the valid from, valid to, and lineage key. If we go ahead and right click on it, give it a select top 1000, let's actually look at the data itself. I'll go ahead and hide the Object Explorer once this is up so we can see it a little bit clearer. And we'll go ahead and give a scroll down to look at this data. You can see exactly how it's organized here with customer key just happens to match up pretty nicely with the customer ID here. That must be because it was brought in that way. But the big scenario here, why we have this surrogate key, is because what if we have data on this customer ID in more than one place? For instance, we've got Tailspin Toys here, Carbonville, Utah. What if we have data on this from, say, our transactional database where we've got data going in here, but then also a salesperson goes on the road and takes a CSV with them? Then what happens when the IDs don't match? That's why we have this as our primary key, and we're going to use ETL to handle this portion here. We're just going to be bringing it in and storing it as a business key instead of an actual primary key where constraints are enforced on that. So that about covers the column design of our dimension tables. When you go to build yours, remember the three main categories. You've got keys, attributes, and metadata. I hope this has been informative for you, and I'd like to thank you for viewing.